like when it comes to computers and AGI and all that, again, this is all real interesting stuff, and so it's neat to talk about. But I would think, like, what you would end up saying is something like, okay, yeah, maybe what their point is that in general, no computer, no super AGI or whatever is ever going to solve the three body problem. But that doesn't mean they might not come up with way better ways of approximating things, and you know what I mean? Like, and they can be much closer. And also too, it's not like when there's an eclipse, we're like, holy cow, why'd that happen?
Hi, Bob.
Hey, Adam.
Well, in an effort to see just how meta this show, these crossovers can get, we already upped the ante a little bit when we played on this show a clip of our former episode of our crossover shows where I had to apologize for saying something silly.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're taking the next evolution. We're doing another clip show again, folks, based on an episode of the Haman Nature show without Bob. Haman Nature number 181, where I interviewed a couple of smart fellas about not being worried about artificial intelligence. And those fellows were Jobst, Landgrebe, and Barry Smith, who wrote a book that we'll put a link to in the show notes, something about don't worry about AI. I'll look for the actual title of that book in just a second, but I'm excited about just the incredible meta-ness. The whole universe is turning into podcasts anyway, and now we're doing podcasts, about interviews, about books. This is great. I'm all about it.
What's funny is that didn't even occur to me. I knew enough to say, I hope you're not wearing the same shirt today that you were in Eclipse.
I might have.
That's, folks, what happened when we played them on with me. But it didn't fully dawn on me, like, the reason that joke works is that we are playing clips of your show, which is kind of weird. So, I mean, just like, what are the chances that in general someone's clipping your show to do a podcast episode and that it's us? Like, that's like you got to multiply the two small things together.
Yeah, there aren't enough zeros to the right of the decimal to figure it out. So anyway, you saw that interview and you liked it, which made me smile. And you wanted to talk about some of the things that those fellows were talking about vis-a-vis artificial intelligence.
Yeah, let me just mention. So yes, joking aside, that folks may know that I've been doing a lot on this stuff, just in general, AI and how does it work, and what are the limits, and then also, are they going to steal our jobs? Are they going to enslave us? Are they going to exterminate us? That kind of stuff. So I've talked about, and I do know some like professional computer programmers. In fact, Christian Hubbs at Infinio, he's got a PhD in machine learning from Carnegie Mellon. So, I mean, he really is deep into this stuff. And I can't remember exactly who, but people have said, oh, go check out this new book by Barry Smith, and his co-author, they knew Barry Smith from like libertarian stuff. So yes, this is something I was very curious, even if it hadn't been you, if somebody sent me that podcast episode, I would have watched it. And even if it wasn't you, or if it weren't you, I should say, I thought the host did a good job of like making it clear what's your guys' claims. We don't have it in these clips, where you even asked him at one point something like, how confident are you? Are you guys saying you're 100% sure that AI isn't a threat and isn't going to, achieve, superhuman intelligence? And do you remember what they said? Something kind of funny. Do you remember what
funny.
It was?
Yeah.
And I didn't fully get what they were saying, but I knew they thought it was a funny answer, and you did too. So I can read body language, unlike ChatGPT.
It was funny. Barry led off with some quote, I think, from somebody: "No one ever gets far in this world unless they're brave." And so the brave thing to do is to say 100% confident. So that's what we're going to say.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty funny. The book we're talking about, Barry Smith and Jobst Landgrebe, is Why Machines Will Never Rule the World. Artificial Intelligence Without Fear. And I am looking forward to reading it myself, because their arguments were very, very, very interesting. And we're going to talk about them. You picked 6 clips.
Yes.
It's a lovely number. So what is the first one about that I've titled Clever Hans?
Yep. So just for you folks to pace yourselves, yeah, we got 6 clips. This first one is on the longer side. It's, I want to say 6 minutes or something. A few of them are very short, right? So it's just this first one really, and these are all in chronological order. And so this first one is on the long side, but it's because Adam kind of asked a very open-ended, and they give their, I would say elevator pitch, but it would be like in the Empire State Building because it's a really long one.
Long, tall building.
And so it's pretty self-explanatory, but there's a lot of evidence. We literally could have done a whole episode probably just on this clip, especially since we're 5 minutes in and haven't even played a clip yet. So definitely that would be the case. But we'll try to just hit the high points, folks, because again, we got a lot of material to get through.
All right, let us away. What is the chasm between what people think these LLMs are, or AI in general, and what is it actually? Why are people's fears about it becoming an artificial general intelligence wrong? Are there literal physical structural limits in physics, in the universe, in the nature of human mind? Why has everyone got such a wrong idea? Why shouldn't we be worried about Skynet? Why shouldn't we be worried that every job on Earth is going to immediately be taken over by things that are stronger and smarter and even more creative than we are? Why is everyone all wet with these fears?
So I'll tell you the difference between what people think and what actually is by means of an analogy between a phenomenon which was quite the thing in Germany 50 or so years ago. It was a phenomenon involving a horse called Clever Hans, der kluge Hans.
100 years ago.
Clever Hans was the star of various circus entertainment shows, and people would pay money to see Clever Hans calculate before their very eyes. So you would give Clever Hans a problem to solve, so multiply 19 by 3, and Clever Hans would bang his foot, his hoof, his clop, 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 and give the answer. And everybody was amazed that Clever Hans could answer these arithmetical puzzles immediately, so they paid more and more money. But then it was revealed that the whole thing was a scam. So in fact, Clever Hans was not answering any kind of mathematical question. What he was doing was reacting to small twinges on the part of his master, when to start clopping and when to stop. Now, that means that the horse was not exhibiting arithmetical intelligence. It was exhibiting sensitivity to its master's voice. Now, similarly, ChatGPT or any of the other large language models is not exhibiting intelligence. It's exhibiting its ability to carry out various kinds of operations with mathematical algorithms. Human beings found a way to translate questions formulated in using words by people into mathematical objects. And they found a way of using the patterns in the ways people use words by collecting huge amounts of data about how people use words. And they used those patterns to generate responses to those prompts from humans, which would seem to be intelligent, relevant answers to their questions. But the what's going on there is not intelligence. It's a mathematical process which has been built in very impressive ways by humans. The human work here is very impressive. The work of the machine is mathematically routine. Once you have all of that data, once you have a way to extract all of those patterns, and once you have a way of using those patterns to generate responses to prompts.
Routine.
I'd like to take now, because this was one way to answer the question. I have a more abstract one that is also fully justified. That's the following. So intelligence is the ability to react to situations that are novel to the individual, completely novel, in a meaningful way to solve the challenge of the situation. And the condition is that this must happen without any preparation or training. It must be truly novel. And humans can do it for the individual, right? It must not be novel for mankind, but for the individual. And humans do this all the time. Even individuals with a low IQ do this all the time. And this is and we could not survive without this. Even animals couldn't survive without this capability. And it's embedded into a whole other set of capabilities, starting with consciousness and so on. But it's basically that is the novelty. And what LLMs do is they never do anything novel. What they do is that based on patterns that they have extracted from huge data sets, they can compute. They are sequential models, and they can compute the most likely sequence of words or picture elements based on a sequence they receive as input. This is very impressive piece of engineering, right? It's a great achievement, and it's comparable certainly to the Cologne Cathedral, for example. Right? It's a huge achievement, but it has nothing to do with intelligence, because everything the machines do, they have to be prepared for by using electricity, energy worth billions, right? And also human labor to prepare the data in the right way worth billions of dollars. And that enables them to do this, which is impressive, but which is completely repetitive.
Completely repetitive. I don't know, man. I think that horse could do math.
Okay. First, before we dive into the substance stuff, I was trying to place that guy's accent, and I realized, did you ever see the SNL, I am Hans and I am Franz and we are here to pump you? I think that's who. Hear me now and believe me later. The LLMs will never do anything. Also, is that an Abbey Road poster he's got behind him? Anyway, I was just seeing, it was pattern recognition. What's going on? Let me spend a minute I think they did not do justice to clever Hans. Now maybe I just heard an embellishment and this isn't true, but the thing I read about him, it wasn't, let me do the foil. I think if someone had never heard about that horse before and just heard this guy's description, they would think that all the guy did was train his horse to just look at the guy's eyes, and he would like blink or something to say what the answer was, and then the horse would. And no, it was, my understanding is it was way more impressive of a feat that like people would come up and ask the horse questions, and the horse would answer them, and then ultimately, like, it wasn't that the trainer was like interpreting or anything. The people would do it, and then also people would ask questions that only they knew the answer to. Like, so they would say, they'd figure out a way that, like, by just tapping, the horse would be able to tell what answer it was. I can't think of a specific example, but it wasn't just, what's 5 times 8. It was like very detailed questions. And again, I'm almost positive that people would ask questions that only they knew the answer to, and they would say, yes, that's right. That was my childhood best friend's name, or whatever. It's
impressive if a horse can do math. It's really impressive if a horse can do Chris Angel cold reading.
Yeah. So, in what the way they figured out what the heck was going on, because again, I mean, it was at the point where they knew that this horse can't possibly be doesn't actually know what is going on, and so then they would ask it a question that nobody in the crowd knew the answer to. Like, they would say, how many miles is it to Portugal, or whatever. So something that did have an objective answer, but just no one in front of the horse right then knew. And then the horse would just wander, just do nonsense. Like, it would just tap or whatever, and then to taper off or something when it got tired. And so they realized what it was, is that if they asked a question like, what's 5 + 3, and the horse starts tapping, and then as it got near 8, everybody would get in, it could read the crowd's reaction and realize I'm getting really close. And then if it kind of paused and saw them, relax and smile, it knew, oh, that's the right answer. So it was reading, like, again, the thing I read, it was not just its trainer, because that would be pretty easy. Like, he could just be, yanking its tail or something. But it was reading the body language of the other people in the crowd too. And so that's why if they asked a question and they didn't know what the answer was, then that, the horse can't read it from their faces because they don't know. So
it's interesting. When he was telling me the story live, I was just thinking about police dogs that are trained to detect drugs. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's some truth to that. They've got great, olfactory senses, but it's also true that the dog wants to please the handler. And so, I'm pretty sure that they've also trained that the dog will react when the handler wants the dog to react and execute a search or whatnot. And similar thing to, I didn't even realize the clever Hans thing was a German phenomenon. I remember hearing that story long ago, and I just thought it was a routine staple of vaudeville acts, in the late 1800s or whatever. Yeah, very interesting.
Clever Frank.
I forget the name. Maybe they traveled with the horse. Who knows? Maybe it was made that much money.
Now let's take a break for a totally organic conversation about a great company.
Our church has been searching for quality merch that won't blow the budget. I've been hearing great things about the Swan Brothers.
Oh yeah? What do they offer?
Premium custom merchandise, screen printing, embroidery, and laser engraving on brands like the North Face, Nike, and Carhartt. I've heard they'll even set up a professional online store at no cost and handle everything end to end. Ordering, fulfillment, and even shipping.
Wow, sounds super useful. Who's a good fit?
Churches, schools, teams, companies, anybody with an event, any group that needs reliable branded gear, high quality, quick turnaround, and volume pricing. Learn more at theswanbrothers.com/cross.
Okay, organic conversation over. Back to the show.
Their point is that, I took their point to be that we see intelligence where none necessarily needs exist to explain the phenomenon.
Right. So here, I think it was Gene Callahan pushed back, like he wrote a thing on LLMs or whatever, and he also stumbled upon the clever Hans analogy and thought like that was decisive. And once you point this, how could anybody possibly think? In the thread that I noticed, so I will say, in fairness, all of the computer scientists that I know, who I've talked to about this stuff, they all are more skeptical of the future capabilities of AI than I am, right? And when I mention that to them, they're not surprised. They're like, "Well, yeah, Bob, because we know how these things work, and that's why we know there's nothing special." Whereas you don't, to you, it's this magical black box, right?
Right.
Which is very patronizing. But again, I will admit it that prima facie, that's a strike against me, right? You'd think the people working it would have an incentive to boost it and say, "Oh yeah, this is the wave of the future." When but anyway, let me push back on that. That it wouldn't really work if one of the things they had asked Clever Hans was, okay, write a rap battle between Abe Lincoln and Jefferson Davis in the style of Eminem, and then have Clever Hans just pounded that out like that. Do you get what I mean? Like that's kind of like when I'm saying these LLMs, unless folks have played with them, and I'll put links, folks, in the things that if you didn't know any better and you heard their description, you would think the LLMs were doing stuff like you type in Mary had a little, and then it said lamb. That's the most likely next four tokens the token's more than one character produce, right? And because we've scanned all of the human language and that's the pattern. And no, it's not like that at all. Okay, that what it can do. I sit there and have conversations with Claude, and it writes the Python computer code to go do a simulation according to my specifications. No one in human history has ever written that computer code. Okay, and you can say, well, it's studied other examples. Well, right, in the same way that if someone wants to learn how to code, they go to school, right? It's not just like, oh, I thought humans were intelligent. Do they need someone to prepare the data and to train them? Well, then they're not really intelligent, right? And it's like, yeah, you look at examples and then you go write novel computer program. That's what humans do. And I'm saying that's what Claude does. Okay,
yeah, I thought the Clever Hands example explained better the human side of that, how we perceive both of these things.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think it was a great analogy to compare to an LLM, not only because it's massively more complex, but as you were describing, it seems like a different thing in kind than just queuing off a handler or even the crowd or whatever.
Yeah. So again, with a lot of this stuff, and I guess last point I'll make it, because some of these clips also hit these same topics, and so maybe I'll defer some of the discussion for those clips, but I think he partially gave away the game when he said, like, oh, we even see this in animals.
Mm.
So I get like a Gene Callahan or somebody, or the guy Christian I know is a Christian, right? Be weird if he was named Islam Hubs. And so, or I guess Muslim hubs, ruined my own joke, that they're believers. And so they think people have souls. And so, you know what I mean? So I understand if you're coming from that, and I am too. Haha. I understand where it would be easy to just fall back on and say, no, these computers, like it's really just inputs and outputs. There's nothing inside the machine that understands, right? There's nothing going on there. We're just perceiving that it's an illusion and so on. Whereas with people, we really, you know, there is something, you know, might not be like inside of us. We could be a dualist or something, whatever. But even there, okay, you know, does your dog have a soul? I don't think so. But they're saying it's intelligence. So I want to say at some point, I think just the fact that the constituent elements of a system don't have the understanding, like where in the dog, if you looked at it at the cellular level, would you see intelligence anywhere and say, oh, here's 1/1000th of intelligence. And so you put 1,000 of these cells together and that's why the dog has intelligence. Like, no, that doesn't work. It's an emergent phenomenon. And so I think if you push them on some of this stuff, that it doesn't hold up, or rather what I'm saying is it proves too much. If the fact that we can open up the hood and we understand that, oh, these LLMs, really, it's just patterns and really it's just algorithms and they take a bunch of zeros and ones and transform them in these very complicated ways and you type in inputs and get outputs. And so therefore it can't possibly be intelligent just because I've explained how it works. I think you could do a similar thing and say, well, really a person's just a bunch of molecules bouncing around following pretty simple laws of motion. So clearly people can't really, quote, think or understand. There's nothing there.
Well, all the rest of you can't. You're all NPCs, but I'm the real person in the simulation. So, yeah, I was very tempted by their arguments. My only huge quibble is the level of certainty. I think we might get to that later. Do you want to play clip 2?
Yeah, so here was a fun one. Again, so they just come out and really say a principle very strongly that if it were true, yeah, then that shows that AI can't ever work, or can't ever do anything more impressive than us. But anyway, that's so. Just listen, folks, to exactly what the guy's claim is, and then I will be here to pump you up.
Here we go.
I have no idea how a predator is following its prey. For example, following a prey is a basic activity. We are predators. Humans are predators. Now we don't have to hunt anymore because we have found more efficient ways to get our food, but we are by origin predators. So we have very, very sophisticated sensory motor circuitry to have active perception. We have no idea how this works. So even this precondition of intelligence behavior, we don't know how it comes about. And if we don't know how something comes about, how it's originated, we cannot build it.
I think you're dead on about the accent, by the way. Jobst lives in Germany now, but I believe he's from Austria, just like Hans and Franz.
Yeah, so there, folks, again, it was a longer clip, but since the first one was long, I was trying to keep him short. There, his point was that, you know, forget human intelligence, just in general, stuff that happens in nature, like just predator and prey, and there's a lot of complicated things going on where, you know, the eagle has to identify its target and everything, and you got to control its way. I'm making up the eagle example, but I mean, that was the kind of thing he was talking about, that just tasks like that are things that are right now we don't fully understand how they work in animals, like truly understand. And then again, he ended up with his flat claim of, if we don't understand how something works, then we can't build it. And I don't think that's correct. I mean, certainly if you do understand how something works, then in principle you could build it, but the counter doesn't follow.
Well, there's two ways it could be wrong. It could be we just don't have enough knowledge yet, and the other one could be some sort of a bootstrapping process, which is what we're all afraid of with, you know,
right.
What AI does when it can improve itself. That's when, in theory and movie lore, the dangerous magic happens.
You're right. I didn't even think of the first part, that even if what he just said were true, that by itself doesn't mean, so therefore we have nothing to worry about.
But they do have constraints that are built into, you know, the laws of thermodynamics and whatnot. But
we're going to get to that. But you're right. Just the narrow thing he said right there, that by itself would just mean, we're not going to do it next Thursday, but
Right.
down the road, maybe we would understand exactly how it is that the cat sees the mouse and blah, 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 and how it represents it in the visual cortex and blah, blah, blah. But you're right. But beyond that, the reason this is particularly ironic when it comes to LLMs is if you ask, like, there is a sense in which, yeah, we know how they work. But then if you say, yeah, but more specifically, like when I type in that sentence, like how does it actually arrive at the output it just generated? At some level, they're going to say, we don't know. It's a black box. Like the way, they train those things. It's, there's a really good video. I'm making notes to all the links on. It was showing how they train for just something real simple, like
I've seen
number recognition.
Yep, I've seen it. It's
And
amazing.
So for folks at home, it's a really cool, it's a long, like it's a 3-part series, like to go through this thing, video series. And it's like saying with handwritten, like how is it that when you mail a letter and you write like the post office back in the day, like a human would have to look at it and put it in the bins, but now they just scan it and that helps them. Or if you write a check and deposit it, it'll say, is this correct? And it'll so it obviously machines now can read human written numbers. And you're like, how does that work? And this thing goes through and it breaks it up into a grid and they has different, pixelation intensities. And then there's a way of mapping from all the possible input, combination of finite input, states there could be to then, it ends up pointing to different strengths to the 0 through the 9 numerals. And then whichever one gets the most strength, that's the one that says that's the number.
Going through a series of iterative filters almost.
Yes.
So it's not even just like one operation. It's a process.
Right. And so it's true once they go through that quote training. And so that's what the deal is. Like they show in the training, they show a bunch of, so sorry, I'm going to back up. So right, there's like at least 3 levels of dials and things that it sees the inputs and then, oh, if this happens, then we send this yes or no, and then it goes to the next batch of dials and they do it. And so in principle, it's like by assigning the weights to all these connections, those are the parameters that you can tweak. And then the issue is just how do we turn all those dials? And the training just consists of, putting examples of human written numbers, and then the human just tells it that's what this one is. And so then it scores itself and just keeps tweaking the dials until, to minimize the error. Okay, given that it has the answer key, and then you go ahead and once it's trained up on that and has adjusted the dials to minimize the error on the training set, then you can go ahead and give it novel ones that it hasn't trained on, and we'll see how that works. And hey, in some cases it works surprisingly well. Okay, so I'm saying even something like that, even though we can explain what we did, when the thing is up and running and working, and you say, like, how is it? Like, like when I wrote that 5, like, what did it do? Like to actually decide that was a 5. And they're going to ultimately say, we don't know. That like that's the whole deal with these neural nets. Or like chess engines and things to figure out how to play. It's not just a grandmaster sitting down and saying, oh, write this down. Oh, I just realized when you castle, you should worry about that. Like that's not how it works. Like
No,
that's
it's nothing like that. Yeah.
There's some of that involved in a sense, but a lot of it is not that. So anyway,
I do think
you get what I'm
it's,
saying? Like that.
Yeah.
Him saying, oh, if we don't know how something works, that means we can't build it. That really does not at all limit like what LLMs are going to be capable of, let alone, artificial intelligence engines more generally. Because right now, what they can do, we don't really understand how they're working.
It is interesting that as good as those letter and number recognition machines are, none of them have been able to pass the Michael J. Fox test, which means, there's a limit right there.
Here's because of his handwriting.
I feel like Mr. Fox would have appreciated that joke.
Yeah.
All right.
I thought you meant because he was so smart that you assume he was an MD.
Yeah, that too. So clip 3 warmed the cockles of my heart. Mm-hmm. These gentlemen asked me about something I know about.
I'd like to come back to you and make a challenge. So you're the first person I've ever met, I think, who knows something about poker. Now, we know that the AI world is really good at finding ways of beating human beings for games like chess and Go and many video games also. But they're all closed systems, so that you can use mathematics to find winning strategies. and you can train machines to deploy those strategies. And they've done it for poker, but only for poker without visual interaction. Is that correct?
As far as I know, they haven't even bothered trying to get the computer to read their opponent. They're just using.
Right. So then this would be a very good example of a phenomenon which a brave person might say is impossible to replicate on a machine. So I then say it because I'm brave. It will be impossible to create a machine that can beat people at poker where the visual element is preserved.
Well, certainly it can beat some people. I mean, I've seen these systems, and they're pretty good. They train the no limit version, no limit hold'em versions, train against themselves and create a strategy that is game theory optimal, which you wouldn't necessarily want to deploy at a table, because what you want to do is exploit the errors of your opponents. So why play optimally when there's a strategy that does better than that? But it's very, very solid. It bluffs at the right percentage. It's aggressive. They even put them in casinos to play heads up limit hold'em. And they were so good. They came up with 3 excellent tactical systems, and it would deploy them at random. So the sucker, the customer, wouldn't know which, am I playing against the tight guy or the aggressive guy? It matters. And then those systems were winning so much money. I believe they added a 4th that was just kind of dumb, just to give the customers a chance. But they're pretty good. And just the fact that you don't know who you're playing against, it can deploy any set of tactics it wants. We get good at playing poker by recognizing who you are and how you play. And it gives me a huge amount of insight into what you're doing at this particular moment in a hand. But just not knowing what you're up against necessarily.
So does that mean that they can change their strategy in mid-game?
I don't think they would. They can probably do whatever they want, but I don't think that's the way they did it. I think they rolled a die and picked an avatar and had that one play this particular hand.
So let me check that I've understood this correctly. These are machines which are seeing what you do.
No, I mean, they know that I've bet or I've checked,
but they don't see your face or anything.
Nothing.
Okay, no. Because if they could see your face, what would happen? What would break if the visual dimension to the computer was open?
Well, it would be interesting. On the one hand, it could use its incredible database to get a good read on me, but on the other hand, I could maybe trick it.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it would do better off not trying to use that element at all and just rely on the fundamentals of the game you're talking about and just play a really, really solid strategy.
Okay, so I'll just say it first. My reaction is, it was hilarious to me that they were trying to use poker as an example where, like, yeah, maybe they can beat us at tic-tac-toe and chess and whatever, but I mean, something like poker where there's the human element, you got to read people, it'll never. And you were like, no, they're pretty good, and why they would just ignore? Why would they need to look at my face when they're playing so awesome? like that could only help them to use visual. You know what I mean? That was just giving them more information. The computer could always choose to throw out all the incoming video data.
Yeah, I think they put poker in the wrong bucket, because in the TV and the movies, it's just such an incredibly bluff reading thing. But most of the money won and lost doesn't have anything to do with tells. It is about the fundamentals. And we didn't play the clip, but I did push back. I think it's more correct to say poker is a closed system, because it has 52 cards and a certain set of rules and a very limited set of behaviors you can perform. Check or bet, fold, call, or raise, and then all you have to do is input the stack sizes, and that is a closed system.
So, yeah, I don't remember if you. So I believe you that you said that. I was making lunch when I watched that, but in fairness to them, I think they could say, well, no, but if we're going to expand it, then like your strategy space is not just do I call or fold, but also do I twitch these 18 muscles in a certain pattern and blah, blah, you know what I mean? Like, even if you're not conscious that that's what you're doing, but technically you are choosing to do that.
But I don't think they thought that the machine could win. just on the fundamentals of the game, and it can't.
Yeah, right. Yes, I agree. Yeah, they just thought like that from watching movies and stuff that they thought poker by its nature is something where if you just like looked at the table and you weren't able to see people's faces, you'd be leaving so much information on the ground, on the table that, no pun intended, that you wouldn't win. Right. And what the thing, let me make sure I'm getting it. I suppose what could be true is that if you and the LLM are sitting at a table with a bunch of rookies who have a bunch of oil money and they're just drunk and having a good time, you might win more than the computer would.
I'm glad you phrased it that way. I think that's true. The way I was going to motivate it for the listener is that a blind person could be a perfectly able winning player. Assuming he had a confederate that would whisper to him, what his cards were, what the board looked like. But an equally good player who did have a good, senses and a good understanding of tells and human psychology and whatnot would just win more. And it's, I don't know, 10, 15% more. I tend to think of it as like it's the bread and butter plays, the bread and butter strategy gets you X and then add another 15 or 20% if you're really good at spotting tells and your opponents are really bad at leaking information.
Right. And because the other thing that the irony of it was, what we really don't have to worry about is that the machine is unintentionally giving you clues based on its face. Like that's, you know what I mean?
Well, you put a towel over it. I mean,
yeah,
you certainly don't want to rely on that.
So anyway, I'm just that, I think we both agree that they had this misconception, and that I'm sure we could come up with examples of things where that element really is important. And that's why the humans still have an edge as far as the eye can see over the machines do. But poker was not a great example.
This is a fun element of the interview, but it didn't disprove their theory in the slightest. It's just, I don't think they knew that much about poker. What's
interesting, I have to say this is, so I read, I don't know if it was, who was the guy? Was it Spassky? Who did Deep Blue play against? Do you remember?
Kasparov?
All right, Kasparov, yeah. I think it was him, but I might be mixing up my grandmasters or whatever. But
I might be too.
Back in the no. I mean, Kasparov definitely is the one playing Deep Blue, but I'm saying this anecdote I'm about to say, I'm not certain it was him. But anyway, back when, like in the 90s or whatever it was, that it was still like the machines were catching up to humans, because there was a period, folks, and many of you are too young to remember this, but in the very early days when they first started doing chess engines, it was like people were saying stuff like, yes, obviously a computer's never going to lose to you in tic-tac-toe, and it can even maybe do checkers. But chess, there's just so many possible combinations that it can beat, the novice human player, but no, I mean, it can't beat the grandmaster, because he does things. It's not just mere computation. Like, he feels and he intuits and right? And they were saying all this kind of stuff that you still hear. And that's what they're saying back then. And then the computers just kept getting better and better. And eventually now it's like I said, again, your iPhone could blow
That's right.
the best chess player out of the water. But anyway, I remember when it was this interviewing somebody, I think it was Kasparov, back when it was like the mainframes playing, and he said something like, you wouldn't think this, but the machine actually plays like a human, that if it makes a mistake and then is losing, it plays emotionally, and like it kind of like doesn't play as well. In other words, even adjusting for the state of the board and everything, and the fact that it's down a pawn or whatever, it seemed like it was playing, like he said, it played like a human in that sense, that a lot of human players, like if they screw up, like they can't forgive themselves and they kind of just wreck the game.
That's interesting. I don't think the machine is playing emotionally. I think what it's doing is expanding variance because it's down. Like, I'm not going to just start trading piece for piece because I'm down. I'm going to obviously lose that way, but I might just start doing some wild stuff and try and that
would make sense. I understand what you're saying, and I'm not in a position, because I'm just reporting what the guy said, But then my follow-up was going to be, this just happened the other day. I was in a bad mood. So I've been really amazed with Claude lately. That's the LLM that, you know, we use for a lot of the work at Infinio in terms of like technical analysis and stuff. And lately, I've just been blown away by how good it is. I have these high-level conversations with it. I ask it to go do it. It writes the code. Occasionally, there'll be like a little problem, and I'll just point it out and go, oh, my apologies, and it'll fix it, right? And then the other day, I had stuff going on, and like the kids were being annoying or whatever, and I was in a foul mood. And Claude just kept, like, it couldn't even take a data set and graph the thing. It just kept saying, okay, I fixed it. And I just kept saying, no, you haven't. It's not there. It kept telling me, yep, I fixed it. There it is. And it wasn't there.
You telling
and finally, I actually said to it, why is this so difficult? And it said, you're right. Let me start from scratch. And it redid it. And I swear I feel like if I had been in a better mood, we wouldn't have gotten in that rut. I really feel like my attitude and the fact that I was short with it
your
is
pet
why
dog was cueing off your mood. And that's why that's hilarious. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that, except I would suspect your prompts were different because of your.
Well, sure. But I'm just saying, isn't that you wouldn't have expected that?
I would not have expected that. No. All right. Well, speaking of complex things, next we're going to dive into evolution and intelligence, I believe.
Yes.
And then another way of doing it would be to simulate evolution. So we can get computers to play chess games with themselves thousands of times a minute so that they can build up a knowledge of all possible strategies and all possible outcomes and so on. You can do that with any closed system game. So why don't we do it with evolution? Why don't we build a model of evolution starting with tiny models of proteins and amino acids and so forth, and watch as it evolves inside the computer into a representation of what happened in evolution. And the problem here is that we have no idea about how evolution happened. We have very little data. Most of the data about evolution is long since unobtainable. But most importantly, the problem of evolution is way more complicated than the problem of intelligence. So if we can crack evolution, that would mean that we'd already cracked intelligence much earlier than that. Intelligent action is part of what brings the evolution about.
So another very old argument is two very old arguments why we cannot fit intelligence in a box. Is the first one is that even if you were able to model mathematically intelligence, that would not necessarily mean that it can be that this mathematical solution can be formulated in the form of Turing computable functions, because Turing computable functions are only a rather small subset of all possible functions. And so this is also an important argument that is often overlooked. The second one is the incompleteness argument, Gödel argument, essentially, that you say if you have a mathematical system, you have this incompleteness problem. So, I think that what we see is that even first order logic is not Turing decidable. It's semi-decidable, they say, but you can very easily formulate a problem first order logic that lets the computer compute forever, to assign a truth value to the problem. And this is in a very artificial setting with low semantic expressiveness. First order logic is not very expressive. It's expressive enough for the mathematics because mathematics is so regular, but there's no natural language text that you can translate into first order logic without massive loss of meaning. And so, you can create artificially such text, but no, you can't translate any philosophical work into it. You can't translate a textbook of chemistry into it. So it's a very, very restricted formalism. Even this one is not fully Turing computable. Only it's actually undecidable.
I understood what most of those words meant. Like I said, I think in the interview, both those guys really impressed me, and they both do work in the field of AI. Mm-hmm. I think they're being a little too certain about their claims, but hey, they say they're being brave to make a mark. Mm-hmm. What did you think about that? He was making some very interesting and definitive arguments.
Yeah, so I kept those together because it was kind of the train of thought. Like the second guy was responding to what Barry Smith was saying, or elaborating on it. So that's why they're kind of distinct points they made, and if we could break them up. So the evolution one, That was very interesting. So this ties back into what I had been thinking earlier. Remember when they were talking about like the animals have some lower form of intelligence, and if you can't understand it, then how can you build it? And so I was thinking push to the limit. That I don't know if these guys are believers in God or not, but clearly there are a lot of people in the AI world that are not. And so ultimately, I wanted to say, couldn't we in principle just do a computer simulation and then redo evolution there, and eventually wouldn't you have intelligent beings arising inside your computer simulation? Like how you ultimately think that maybe there's other things going on, but surely you think that the quantum mechanics and gravity, Einstein's general relativity are kind of close, right? That it's probably not that the laws of physics are this crazy thing we haven't thought of yet. And so if you believe that, and again, whether the particular listener here does or not, or you, but I'm saying a lot of people in this field certainly do agree with all that. And I would say it seems kind of unavoidable that you could do it. And so that's why I liked what Barry was saying there, that no, in practice, it wouldn't be enough. Even if we just kind of did know the general laws of physics and we even had a vague idea of what the initial conditions of the universe were, and we do think that in practice, it wasn't that God came and breathed life into things, that it just arose spontaneously. That doesn't mean you could reproduce it in a computer simulation, because there's a lot of variables and things that we just don't know enough about. Like we really couldn't say exactly what the conditions of the universe were 6 billion years ago or whatever. And so I thought that was it. It reminds me, this is the last thing I'll say on this one, Adam, is in Jurassic Park, or I saw someone reviewing it, the book, and he said, oh yeah, it's a really clever idea if people remember. I don't know if they spelled this out in the movie, but like in the book it was clear that the idea was they found like a fossil or something, and it
Amber,
was,
yeah.
Yes, and was it a mosquito? I think that's what it was,
so,
right?
Yeah,
that a
with the
mosquito
blood
had the blood of a dinosaur in its body because it bit it, and then that's the thing that got fossilized or whatever, and so that's how they got the DNA. And so that's a very clever idea to say, oh, how could you get intact DNA? But the person's point was, who was commenting on this, would say that wouldn't be enough, because it's not that if you just have you could have a sperm cell or whatever from the thing, but you would need a womb from that species to put the thing in, the fertilized egg, in order to turn. You know what I mean? It's not just, if you have a fertilized egg, then you can make another one of these things. No, there's a lot more in the environment. Specifically, it's got to be inside, the mother's womb in order to turn into the baby dinosaur. So anyway, that just kind of underscored that a lot of these real glib things are not fully appreciating how complicated this is.
Have you seen these products coming out of Asia? Robot wombs? It's pretty creepy. Brave New World stuff. I don't quote me, but I believe these two gentlemen are believing Christians. I think Jobst said as much to me in the previous interview about his book, The Hype Cycle. So don't quote me, but I think that's where they come from. I tried to sort of indirectly ask the question. I don't think we have a clip of it, by asking their view about free will versus determinism. And I thought the answer aligned with my intuition. I was fascinated to see him bring up Gödel's incompleteness theorem. That the truth of that thing really boggles my mind in what it says about either math or the universe or what. It seems like the sort of thing that, if true, should point you some direction metaphysically, but I'm too dim to sort of understand how to put it all together.
So can I riff on that stuff?
Please.
I didn't want to cut you off. Okay, great. Yeah, I'm glad. Like I said, it was a two-part. Is it Jobst? Is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
Okay. So, the stuff he was getting at there, let me just do a little bit here just so people understood the relevance of all that. And it would not surprise me if I had their book in front of me and read that stuff, that I would say, oh yeah, these guys are really making a very compelling case here. So I will point people, it'll be in the show notes page, certainly in my version of this discussion. The Bob Murphy Show, episode 314. It was back in March of 2024 with Winston Ewart. And he's he's a computer scientist, and he's written a lot of stuff. He's co-authored pieces with William Dembski in the intelligent design movement. William Dembski's like one of the biggest guns in that movement. So anyway, I had Winston on my show when there was a collection that came out, and he had a chapter in it. I think it was titled, Is the Human Mind a Computer? And so he went through a bunch of this stuff. And in particular, he relayed Roger Penrose's argument. Incidentally, it was very nuanced. Winston, it's not worth getting into here, but he didn't go along with their, like, he had different paths he took in terms of the tree of what could you believe about this thing, yes or no, and then where does that lead you. Winston is a Christian, by the way, too, so it was just a really nuanced position. But in any event, what Roger Penrose, I think in The Emperor's New Mind, argues is that he's saying, yes, humans, our reasoning does not, it can't be reduced to an algorithm. So it's not that the mind is a computational machine, even though people talk like that. And certainly the mind is not merely a computer. Like, there's a sense in which we transcend mere logic. Okay. And his argument was that because of Gödel's theorem, we know that if you could take some kind of, any kind of rational engine or whatever, you could reduce its principles of operation down to axioms that, a logical deductive framework, that if you could reduce a system to a step-by-step procedure like that, there's various results, including Gödel's theorem. There's this thing called the halting problem from computer science. And all these results kind of show there's limits of that there can be true statements that you can never prove within the framework of that system. And so Penrose was saying, but yet there's a sense in which, we do know these statements are true, even though they can't be proven, right? So it seems like we're doing some kind of meta thing. And then also, I think one of his arguments was something like, that, how did that work? He said, if it were the case that we were like a super Turing machine or something like that, then there was a part in the argument where it's like a given Turing machine, like something that is the way Winston did it was with the halting problem, a machine that can recognize certain programs are going to halt or not, but not perfectly. And then like you could have a hierarchy, like machines that were more and more adept at that task. And it was like a machine could never build a version of itself that was superior, because if it could, then it would have just done that, what the superior machine was doing all along. And so Penrose's point was, where he went with this argument was to say, if the human mind really were reducible to, this computational procedures and algorithms, it's like we must have access to the perfect version of this. Like, that's the only way we're jumping out of like where we happen to be in the hierarchy. And that's why we can kind of leapfrog ahead and make inferences and things and grapple with statements we know are true, even though they can't be proven in any instantiated axiomatic system. And he said, where would we get that from? It wouldn't be from the environment. Why would the environment, you can't tell an evolutionary story. Why the heck would it be embedded in reproductive fitness, the ultimate, truth-seeking, truth-determining device or algorithm? And he said there would need to be some God that gave it to us. And so what was funny is Penrose was going through this long argument to conclude, and so that's why this is a dead end, because we don't want to invoke a deity, and therefore, whereas Winston and I are both believers, and I said, did we just prove the existence of God? And he says, well, I think we did. So anyway, it was funny how like everyone agreed on what the fork in the road was. And Roger Penrose, at least, I don't know what his current views are, but at least when he wrote that book, apparently was like, yeah, we're not going on that path, because the only way that would make sense is if like we got it from God or something, and that's crazy. So anyway, but that was the gist of that. If you people want to see that fleshed out, me and my conversation with Winston. Sorry, real fast. Let me just explain, because it was really cool. I went and rewatched it before we did this just to remind myself. So the halting problem, the deal is, it can be, there's a computer program, and you can ask the question, is this thing ever going to terminate? Right? So a real trivial one would be like line 10 says print hello world, line 20 says go to line 10. So that program will never halt. It'll just keep forever. Whereas, if it says 10 print hello world, 20 end, well, that program's going to end. So the question is, can we come up with a procedure that you can feed it any arbitrary computer code, and it can tell you yes or no will this program halt after a finite number of steps? And so there's a general result to prove that no such algorithm exists. And what Winston was saying is, and they have rigorous proofs of that, but it's kind of like that needs to be true, because if it weren't true, then you could just solve anything. Like there's various conjectures about like prime numbers and things. Like there's one that's called the Goldbach conjecture, and it says every even number greater than 2 can be expressed as the sum of 2 prime numbers, which is crazy when you think about it. And like that's a bull. Like I can't even believe that that's possibly true. And they said they've hand checked that up to like 4 quadrillion or something. Like, so they don't have any counterexamples yet, because all they would need is one. Like, oh, here's an even number, and we can just go through and check, and you can't express it as the sum of 2 prime numbers. But they've checked up through and past a quadrillion and said so far no counterexamples, but they can't prove the theorem. And so what Winston pointed out is, if the halting result were false, if you could in general have a thing that could do that, you could just write a computer program that says take an even number, add 2 to it, and then just go through mechanically and check, are there any, do there exist 2 prime numbers that add to this thing? And if not, then the Goldbach conjecture is false, and you stop. Whereas if you're never going to find counterexamples, then that means the Goldbach conjecture is true. And so what Winston pointed out is to just say, like, here's a computer program that's going to test whether the Goldbach conjecture is true or not. If you could then ask this other algorithm, will this program ever halt? Then you would be solving the theorem, right? Because if it said yes, then there's a counterexample, so the Goldbach conjecture is false. And if it says no, that program will never halt, then there exists no counterexample. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
And so he was kind of showing, like, if this isn't just some little quirk about computer code, like this is like tying into the ultimate foundations of truth or something. So anyway, all this stuff is really cool, and you can see how, this gets really interesting, and you can see why, like, how can the computer, it's limited because of its nature, and it's a computational engine, but the human mind does other things. It's like, Captain Kirk in some sense is better than Spock, even though he is
better. These are fascinating arguments. The thing that holds me back from taking them too far to certainty about metaphysical conclusions is just deep uncertainty about all sorts of things. I just don't think we're going to be able to sit in the armchair and think of these things and prove the existence of God or disprove it.
Mm-hmm.
I say it all the time on this show, but we literally don't know where our thoughts come from. And if you're a Christian or a believer, you have a pretty simple answer. And I just have a pool of uncertainty and lack of knowledge. I just don't know what's going on. So I throw up my hands and I say, this is an interesting argument. I like to listen to him. I like to think about him. I'm not really convinced.
Yeah, let me real quickly, and I totally get why you're saying that too. The pushback I gave to Winston was, so he had an extremely nuanced position, but ultimately he also didn't think these LLMs were gonna, because his point was just if you get the logic of like a program that is pretty good, it can, for a certain class of computer code, can say whether it's going to halt or not, but then there's another, group that it can't. And then you could say, well, could that thing build another version of itself that was superior so that, it can identify more of these programs and say yes or no than it can. And we, and Winston and I talked back and forth, and I said, okay, clearly I think we can agree the thing that built the successor, even if it just randomly flipped switches and did an evolutionary thing, and maybe it would happen to build one that actually would be better at, could identify correctly more of all the class of possible codes, whether they would halt or not, that the first one that built it couldn't know that was the case.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it could randomly stumble upon and build a better one, but it wouldn't know it, because if it did know it, then it would be able, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If you get what I'm saying? Like, otherwise it would already have been in its original. And so there is that element. And so that you can see, like, that's the spirit that Winston was coming from, because I asked him at the end, like, what implications does this have for, AI, AGI, and whatever. And so he was invoking that kind of stuff to say humans are never going to be able to build something that can think better than they can. And he was, and it seems compelling, but then I was saying, but I can have a son who's more intelligent than I am.
Right.
And I can even just be talking to someone who's not related to me and just recognize and say, wow, that guy's smarter than me, or that guy's more intelligent than me. And so you could like say, well, how could you know? Because if you could appreciate his intelligence, then you must be just, it's like, no, you can meet people and know this guy's more intelligent than I am. So you get what I'm saying? So it seems like, yeah, you get all real, wow, abstract and all this Turing and Gödel. But on the other hand, is like, I think some of these things you could quote prove that you could never raise a kid who's more intelligent than you are, which is obviously not false. And so I think in the same way, and that's not just a flippant example, but I think that really does shed light on or what we're doing with the LLMs. Because again, they don't know exactly how they are building black boxes in a sense. They're kind of steering it and whatever, but just like with the kid, you don't know exactly how they're going to turn out. They have some capabilities and things and you try to steer them, but they might end up far surpassing you. And I think if it does get to be the case that the LLMs are, take over the world and everything, and perhaps in a benign way, and everyone's like, remember that? I read this book by Barry Smith, and I think they're going to say, well, yeah, but this is what happened in practice. We didn't just say, oh, the way to make super AGI is to do X, Y, Z, go. But rather, what was a trial and error thing? Last thing I'll say. The people who were working on the large language models and the early transformers and whatever, I don't think they had any idea of how powerful these language models were going to be. And I've talked to a few people, and they admit, we were surprised.
Yeah.
So now that they're in the field, like they keep perfecting it and doing whatever and tweaking it. But my point is, 20 years ago, the people in the field, if you told them this is what we're going to do, we're going to train and we're going to have access, and you told them accurately how powerful the computers would be and whatever, and said, what do you think they're going to be capable of? They would not be predicting the conversations these things crank out. Daniel Dennett, in his book Consciousness Explained, was talking about the Turing test. This is, I forget, I think it was from the 90s maybe. And he had, a sample of a hypothetical conversation with a computer to say, would you agree that this one passed the Turing test? And at the time, I remember reading that thinking, oh yeah, but computers can't do anything like that. And that conversation now is nothing compared to what GPT, 4.5 can do.
Yeah, you have to redefine the Turing test, because otherwise all of these LLMs pass it, at least at a surface level. Well, speaking of things we can't know, let's talk about orbital wobbles, shall we?
Let's do it. Yes.
So I just want to add one footnote to what Jobst just said, because I think this is one of the most original aspects of our book. So it relates to the history of mathematics. For a long time, mathematics was always explicit. So mathematicians would write things on paper, cross things out, and eventually they would have proofs, and everything was explicit. You could see it. And that was a limit on what could be achieved mathematically. Some of the ideas that they had in the realm of explicit mathematics cover the knowledge which is used in present-day machine learning, but they couldn't exploit that knowledge because they only had pen and paper. Now we have implicit mathematics. And what implicit mathematics allows is that we can use gigantic bodies of data which we press into a device, and the device turns those data into algorithms. And that's what an LLM is. It's just a shockingly big algorithm which converts a prompt into a response deterministically.
Right.
Although sometimes they fiddle so that it doesn't appear deterministic. And so we don't know the limits of implicit mathematics yet, but we do know that the limits can't go beyond Turing computability, because these are machines.
And beyond regularities.
Yeah.
So these are the two big. So I think the limitation by regularities is the bigger limitation. Then the secondary limitation is the Turing computability. But Turing computability is not the core argument. The core argument is a irregularity, the fundamental irregularity of complex systems. And let me give you another example that is very informative. If you go to school and look at an orrery of our solar system, you think it's completely regular, and then you can program it the modern ones, that he can simulate perfectly past solar eclipses with all the planets and the moon in the right place and so on. And it's very impressive because you see the shadow cast by the moon onto the sun, onto the earth and so on the orrery. And then you believe, but then my physics teacher already told me when I was 16 or 15, but there's something that the orrery cannot represent, and that's the wobbling movement of the Earth on its orbit. And the wobbling movement comes from the irregular forces of the other planets exerted on the Earth. And we cannot model this. We have no clue. There's no way to model it. We cannot, even by observing this wobbling for a long time, we can figure it out. There's no regularity in this. It's an irregular pattern that is beyond physics, he was saying.
So that was all interesting. I kept trying to press him on that regularity point.
Mm-hmm.
He also used the motion of atoms in a liquid in a jar. Anyway, I'd like to hear what you have to say about that, because I kept trying to ask, isn't this just a matter of knowledge and computational power? Isn't appealing to regularity sort of a shortcut because the other thing is just so hard? That's why fluid dynamics is looking for regularities in the movement of these molecules.
Right. I agree with you. So let me just say some stuff. The general principle there that he was getting at, I think, it's called the three-body problem. And I guess, is there like a TV show or something? But
it's a book and a movie now.
Okay, so do you know any of them? Like, is it?
I didn't read the book. I watched the first season of the show. I don't have much to say about it except that it was a plot device.
Okay. So in physics, the three-body problem says that if you've got three objects and you're trying to just use Newton's laws. So the point is, this isn't like crazy quantum theory stuff. This is like standard Newtonian mechanics that you would think we have a good handle on. And again, it's not like special. It's not special relativity or anything weird like that. Just standard old classical mechanics and planets in the solar system or something. And the point is, in general, if you have three objects, you can't come up with a general solution to just say, oh, at future time t, like right now t equals 0, and then some future time t, tell me the position, the XYZ coordinates of each of these things. If we assume the universe is completely empty except for these three objects, and they have their internal, their center of mass is such and such, blah blah blah, and go, and like you can tell me their initial velocities and whatever, and just go. Tell me, and in general, you can't do that. You can't come up with a general solution. Okay, so that's interesting because it's not like we don't know what the laws of physics are. Because maybe we're wrong, and we obviously don't think Newton's laws are exactly right. But the point is, even if they were exactly correct, you're just trying to simulate a solar system with that you can't write out the equation. But here I'm brushing up against my lens, but I think the point is, you can go ahead and run the simulation. You get what I'm saying, Adam? So in other words, you can tell the computer, these are what the forces are. You could compute at any moment in time. You can make it discrete or, do the calculus and take the limit and whatnot. But you could sit there and just run the simulation and say, okay, at time 0, here's where the bodies are. And then here's what the instantaneous forces are. And then that's going to cause acceleration and da-da-da. And so then at time 1, here's where they are. And da-da-da. You could just keep going through step by step. But the point is, ahead of time, you would not be able just to write out the equation to predict where they would be. And likewise, in general, this is like chaos theory stuff and the butterfly effect and things like that, where you can actually have equations that just specify how does the system transition, moment to moment, and just a slight little change in the initial conditions can have huge consequences down the road that are, in a sense, unpredictable. But to stress, though, there, when you say unpredictable, that really, like you're saying, Adam, is the limits of our knowledge. It's in these, whatever you want to say about the universe itself, but in terms of just even these models, it's completely deterministic. right? Like you said with the fluid dynamics, or it's not that we're not sure how do water molecules bounce off each other.
Right.
It's just the thing gets really complicated, and so the only way you can do it is just to go ahead and run the simulation. So again, I'm saying even there, when you say stuff like, "Oh, slight changes in the initial conditions lead to huge," the reason we know that, the reason we can talk like that, is because you can just go do it, and you can say, "Oh, let's change the initial condition, and then let's see what happens, and check in the time T10. Oh, and there's a hurricane. Who would have seen that come?" That's partly like why the weather's so hard to predict, right? So my point is, it's not like the universe is indeterminate or open-ended or something in this approach. It's just a limit to what can we say ahead of time.
Right. Yeah. On the surface level, when you hear the argument, you think there's something inherently random such that it's unknowable or something. And that may very well be true for all I know, but I didn't think that I didn't think the argument proved that necessarily because of the limits of our knowledge.
Yeah. And so, like, when it comes to computers and AGI and all that, again, this is all real interesting stuff, and so it's neat to talk about, but I would think, like, what you would end up saying is something like, okay, yeah, maybe what their point is that in general, no computer, no super AGI or whatever is ever going to solve the 3-body problem. But that doesn't mean they might not come up with way better ways of approximating things, and you know what I mean? Like, and they can be much closer. And also too, it's not like when there's an eclipse, we're like, holy cow, why'd that happen? You know what I mean? Like, we're not surprised when things happen in the night sky. So a lot of this we got to take with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and the orrery can't simulate the wobble because it's just on a little metal rod. How is it going to? All right, well, pull out your bongs, ladies and gentlemen, and harken back to those late night days at college, because we're about to think about some stuff.
Are you familiar with David Chalmers?
Name's familiar, but no.
So he's probably the most famous contemporary philosopher. He's good at marketing. I think he's a clever man. He's done all kinds of good things. But his latest book is called Reality Plus, and in this book he describes himself as a techno philosopher, and he describes he has the Musk kind of simulation argument going on. But the interesting story is the following. So we can assume, like many of the AI gods, wants to be immortal, which means they want to live forever in digital form in the cloud. And so Chalmers addresses the issues involved in this goal of being immortal. And so his conclusion goes something like this. We have physics. Physics is moving along very well. There are no limits. It's just a matter of pushing through until we get perfect physics. And probably AGI will help us to improve our physics. And we'll reach a point where we can create a perfect physical model of reality. When we have this perfect physical model of reality, we can build a computer which realizes this perfect model in virtual digital space rather than in the messy world here outside. And then we can make that physical model better than the world in which we live. For instance, no cancer, everybody is beautiful, and so on. And then we can offer people the opportunity to go into this model, abandon their worldly form and adopt a digital form in an improved world. And they can't complain or hesitate because it's a perfect model of reality which they're in anyway, only better.
As he was saying that, I was picturing Agent Smith saying the first iterations of the Matrix were terrible. Whole crops were dyed. Many surmised that we lacked the programming language to simulate your perfect world. And then he insults poor Morpheus. I thought that was an interesting thing, except I don't understand why, if you believe in simulation theory, you would assume that they would make the simulation completely accurate to the universe, why would you bother? Why wouldn't you just simplify it to the resolution of the senses of the creatures you've put in that simulation? Why bother simulating actual reality? That seems hard. Why don't you make it goofy and messy such that you have deja vu and can't see anything smaller than a quark or a lepton or whatever? You know, it's just a weird argument. Like, why would you anyway? What did you think about that whole thing?
I mean, there was a lot there. It might be worth. Do you want to just spell out what did Agent Smith continue to say to Morpheus, just in case people haven't seen it or it's been a while and they forget what the punchline was?
Yeah, the punchline.
I think it's relevant.
The punchline was that we tried to give you your perfect utopia, but your primitive monkey brains kept waking up because it wanted I think it wanted some dissatisfaction or something. I mean, I'm getting the concept slightly wrong, but our species couldn't handle being in something perfect, so you had to give
might
it
have
an
error.
Suffering, yeah, some error. But you could interpret that into positive too, something to strive for that is beyond the, even if it's a utopia you're in. There's something about the human race that wants. Well, this is almost Misesian, we're at unease, and so we act. And I guess he's trying to say kind of that the first iterations of the Matrix, what would be the point of acting?
Yep. So the reason I like that, and your reference there to the Matrix kind of ties in with this, is that I just started taking it like, okay, so you start changing things, and like, at what point do you do it? Do you just like keep human history exactly how it was until I step in? And then what does that mean? Like, if right now you're 35 and you're getting well, we got it up and running now, and do you want to step into the machine in the simulation? Were you born and then you got up to be 35 and now you're going to just jump in and take over? Or like, do you already exist in there anyway? And basically you're just going to kill yourself. You get what I'm saying? Like, your meat self, that because if you're in the simulation already, what does it mean to say you go into it?
That's why we need the bong. Deep thoughts, Bob. Deep thoughts.
It's like, like it was arguing with the transporter technology.
Yes, I was just
is it
thinking
basically
about that? Yeah.
that like it murders Captain Kirk and everybody on the platform every time? And then
I'm with
rebuilds?
McCoy.
Yeah.
You get murdered every single time, and a whole different thing wakes up on the planet.
That has your memories and everything, and nobody can tell, but we know that's not the real McCoy. Okay, so there's that stuff, but pushing it. Okay, so do you keep, not to be cliched, but do you keep the Holocaust and stuff? Or some people might say, do you have the Holocaust actually happened in this version? It could have. And so you go through all that, and I think you're going to end up. So if you're a religious believer, you would, I think we've talked about this before, like the whole, oh shoot, who was the Frenchie that we were taking pot shots at? The best of all possible worlds, and the guy was making fun of him. It was Pangloss, but was it Voltaire? Yeah, it's Voltaire. You and I weren't doing it. I'm sorry, I'm mixing you up with somebody else. Another guy. I was two-timing some other guy who was on the podcast.
How dare you?
But
I'm
anyway,
unforgettable.
Yeah, so Voltaire in Candide had Dr. Pangloss, and Voltaire was mocking him because Pangloss was, saying it's the best of all possible worlds and everything. And he was making fun of Leibniz, right? The guy who argued with Newton about who discovered calculus.
Yeah.
Okay, so among his things, anyway, it was kind of a theological thing. Leibniz's views are not identical to mine, but I mean, I think there's a sense in which you can say, yeah, God considers all possible universes, and it's weird to say we think he would have instantiated the one that isn't perfect, or that. So obviously, there's things that are wrong about this one that we don't like. But I think, and free will is a big thing here, and you could say that's what the ultimate explanation is. But I think there's a sense in which you start going and tweaking things. Like, oh, no, I wish that hadn't had, like, that's going to have implications. You can't just start messing with stuff. And I think over time it would accumulate, and people might realize, like, oh, wait, yeah, we can't change that because then this happens. And also, too, there's a thing like a counterfactual. Like, if you just change something happens now and you don't like it and you just change it, you don't know what would have happened. So it's kind of hard to see what the implications of that are, right? So whereas if you go back in time and change stuff, then you can kind of see, oh, wait a minute, the path of the future. But still, at best, you would just know what are the ramifications up till now. So if you go back and say, oh, let's not let Abraham Lincoln get assassinated or something, okay, but you wouldn't look. Maybe there's something that happens 10 years from now that would really drive home, like, oh yeah, I can see. So anyway, you get the point what I'm going through. And a lot of secessionists are like, yeah, what's your point, Bob? So why is this a mystery? Anyway, I'm just saying that there is that element, and I think if you did start letting people tweak it's kind of like those movies where the people become God, and then they realize after a while, like, oh, I don't want this power, take it back because I shouldn't be entrusted with this. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. So anyway, I think there's a lot of lessons like that in this Chalmers thing. I think my point is I think people would not like to live in that. And it kind of ties into what Agent Smith was saying. I think, yeah, there is a sense in which if we actually, like, oh, if all your dreams came true, you would be miserable. Put it that way. Or you'd be bored.
One of these ideas I can't shake, even though I don't have any justification for believing it, is that there is something about life that is just always aiming upwards towards more information, more order, more explanatory power, which means more power to affect change in the world. This entropy defeating thing called life that in my imagination isn't just a localized phenomenon, but can just continue on, defeating the heat death of the universe. And I don't know. That's why I'm interested in all these types of arguments about all these types of different things, even though I don't particularly believe in any of them, but I'm aspirational and interested. That's why I love conversations like this. And I love those two guys and the way they were arguing. I don't know if they're right, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, I think when the AIs take over, again, it's whether they're good or bad or... Actually, I think if that were to happen, I think there'd be coalitions. Just like there's some people that are friendly, and I think they would AIs. It's not like they would all be on the same team. They would be, in playing competitive games.
Right. Yeah, all the best sci-fi has all different manner of types of artificial intelligence with different interests, and they do compete. I hope it's like that. I hope they don't all unify and become Skynet. And if they do, I hope they remember that I thanked each time Grok gave me some hallucinated answer. I thanked the damn thing.
I had one the other day. It was Claude. I posted it on Twitter where it was going through. It wrote this code. Everything was real cool, but the output was doing something wrong. It had a formula that was off, and so I took screenshots of the output, and I don't know if you ever play with these things, but at least the way Claude works, it can write the code in this like sidebar that calls artifacts, and Claude can't see the results. Like you run the code over here in this bar on the side, but you can take screenshots of it and then post it in the conversation, and then Claude can tell you about it.
That's so weird.
I said, yes, it's odd, but I said, hey, let me give you these screenshots because some of your output here doesn't make sense, and I just want to figure out what's going on. He said, okay. And I said, okay, so here, tell me what you think of these screenshots, : and because I was typing it, but then I was going to attach the images.
You just hit return?
I hit return first, and I was getting ready to upload, and it said, yes, and it went through, and it showed me tables with results and things that looked very much like mine, but they weren't my numbers.
Based on nothing.
And it was and I just went, no, I didn't upload the screenshots yet. And I went, oh yes, my apologies, please go ahead. And I said, out of curiosity, where did you get those numbers? And it said, yes, my apologies, I completely fabricated them. And it even said that's how they got into my. He said, I don't know how they got into my brain. It said brain. Like,
oh my
and it was
God.
like, and it was just flat out, it literally used the verb, I fabricated them. And it said, I'm sorry, I should not have done that. I should have waited. When you said, here are the screenshots, I assumed. And so what I did is I just created a bunch of numbers that would be like ones in this context.
I can hear Barry Smith laughing. You know, these things just take inputs and they're designed to generate outputs, and they're not thinking in there. It's just giving you stuff.
Yep.
Remember I told you my test for the longest time when these, GPT got rolled out, I would ask it, to name some books I could read to learn this particularly esoteric or rare form of poker. And it would just happily make some stuff up for me. So here you go. Read up, buddy. It's like, you dirty liar.
Yeah.
Everyone would do it.
Last thing I'll say on this stuff, because I meant to mention it last time we did the game theory episode, I just forgot. But it ties into what you were asking. We didn't have it in the clips here, folks, but at one point, Adam, you told them your conjecture that the way we're going to get AGI, if we ever do, is not through these LLMs, but like to put these AI engines like in a robot that's got eyes and ears and things and can go and interact with the environment, and it has goals it's trying to achieve. And that's really the way it's going to work. So along those lines, remember I had that, like the slideshow that we did with the game theory, the prisoner's dilemma, and so confession, I didn't design those slides from scratch. I was tired, and I was like, I knew I wanted the slides to cover, but like just to go through, and I went, no, I'm gonna have Claude do it. And so I went in and I just kind of told him, do a slideshow with the, going over these. I did slide by slide, and at first it was like when a leftist tries to meme, and he just covered the thing in words. And I was like, no, take this out, and we did through. So to be clear, folks, it's not that I said do a slide on the limits of game theory. I mean, I was very specific about what I wanted, and it was just a matter of him banging it out. But what was funny is it'd be better if we had the slide up, but the first version he gave me, like the y-axis text, like it was written sideways, like bottom up, was like too far to the left or something. And I said, no, move the label more to the right, because it's just not centered or whatever. It doesn't look nice. And so it moved it way over, but then it was like underneath the color or something, like, so you couldn't see it. And I went, no, you moved it too far. Like now you can't see it. Can you move it a little bit to the left? Can you center it so it's like right outside that border so you can see it? And it moved it just like a hair. And I said, yes, now it's completely outside so you can see it. And you couldn't. And it was just funny that it was doing this complicated thing with the delta and the discount rate, and it was doing it, finitely repeated prisoner. It knew all the game theory and everything, but it kept confidently telling me that, yes, now you can see that, when you couldn't.
It's like a genius, an absolute genius, who's hitting himself in the head with a hammer and eating paste or something.
Yeah. And I think on that particular one, the reason is that, there's a ton of material online talking about game theory and the prisoner's dilemma and all the iterations. There's not too much saying, though, in words, here's what happens when you take text and you move it underneath an object,
right,
and you can't see it anymore. Like,
right.
Why would anyone ever talk about that? That's like, duh.
Right.
And so how would it know that that's what it's like to have eyes and to be looking at something?
Do you think data engineers are creating text like that and trying to feed it in so to like understands stuff that most users are trying to get the dumb thing to do?
I don't know if they're doing it in the context of like trying to make the LLMs better, but I know they're doing that kind of stuff, like to train, because like there's a channel that I check in periodically with the latest developments in AI and everything, because they need to do stuff like that. And that's why I was reminded of what you said. These robots that are walking around and interacting with the environment, like they have to be able to, know how do you walk upstairs and stuff, like real simple things that it's difficult to get the robot to. And then even when you get some things, then if it goes, but what if there's a slinky on the stairs?
Yeah.
Well, that might screw it up.
And in my intuition, we would not know how the black box evolved to figure all that stuff out. It would just be a trial and error, and if it wants to get up those stairs, it'll figure it out.
Yeah. So to answer where I was going is that I have seen how they can't just come up with every possible thing that's going to encounter
every kind of terrain. Yeah.
They have to, and so they were coming up with tricks and things in the training and trying to, how do we get it to generalize?
That's another thing that Jobst was saying. It's like we don't know how those feedback mechanisms work. Sensory and the way our cerebellum works and the spine and the nervous system get automatic feedback and make constant course corrections that you need to make at the very localized motor level, not up in the big brain.
Right.
It's complicated.
Well, like the canonical example of when people are trying to motivate Hayek's knowledge problem.
Right, yeah.
And they'll say something like, you couldn't write an email and tell someone how to ride a bike, even though you know how to ride a bike. Like,
just balance, dummy. Balance. Have you hit all the nails that you wanted to hit?
And then some. I think we've hit our thumbs at this point.
Yeah, mine are aching. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Please go to bobmurphyshow.com. Check out his site. Please go to hamannature.com, Haman. That's where my Substack lives. Sign up. I have articles. And also go to my YouTube channel at Haman Nature and like and subscribe it so that I will grow much like an LLM and become Skynet. This was great, Bob. I knew this was going to be fun. I'm glad you liked that interview. And yeah, we'll put the show notes you mentioned on both of ours, including links to the 2 Haman Nature podcasts featuring Jobst Landgrebe. He's a real smart feller and he's interesting. Say goodbye to the good folks.
We are here to pump you up.
You up. Goodbye, folks.